Shalom Havrim, James Trim here. Today I want to talk to you about the oral law. I recently made a Facebook post about the oral law, and some of the responses I got from some people that were very opinionated about the oral law made it clear that they didn't have a good understanding of what the oral law is. Now, folks, if you're going to be very opinionated about something, it helps to know what you're talking about. So when you're very opinionated about a topic and then you don't even know the fundamentals of the topic, that's not something for you to venture into being very opinionated about. If somebody posts about neurosurgery, I'm not going to go in and start telling them what's what about neurosurgery because I don't know anything about the topic. And so it's very amazing the number of people that think that they have some strong opinions. Well, they do have some strong opinions about a topic which they apparently know nothing about. And I can tell they know nothing about it because their comments express that they know nothing about it. Their comments express that they don't even know what it is. So let me begin today by, I want to talk about the oral law in a few videos in the near future, but today I'm going to talk about just defining what the oral law is. Before we get going, I need to ask everybody to please donate to support this work, to support these videos, the blogs that we put out, the research that we're doing on Hebrew and Aramaic origins of the New Testament, tracking down and scrutinizing Hebrew and Aramaic manuscripts, comparing their relationships with other ancient versions in Greek, Aramaic, Latin, etc., and tracking down the information about the origins of the New Testament from a Hebrew Aramaic origin standpoint. That's just one of the many things that we're doing, but also understanding the books of the so-called New Testament from a true Jewish perspective. So how do you donate to support this work? Well, you can donate by clicking on the donate button in the video description or sending donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org. By doing that, you're helping us. You're also helping me, as I am the stay-at-home caretaker for my disabled wife who's chronically ill and suffers from chronic pain. And her medical bills in the last month after insurance have been over $1,000. And that's between procedures. We've actually been trying to get a surgical procedure done on her. And we've scheduled it twice already. Long story there. Expensive medications, even after our insurance. There's a couple of her medications that are in the hundreds of dollars a month. So please donate to help us out and help this work as well. Also, we need to raise at least $265 by the end of the day today, just to keep our account from going in the negative tonight. So you can donate by PayPal, by sending donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org, by clicking on the donate link in the video description. From there, you can donate by PayPal, Zelle, or GoFundMe. If you possibly can, we're asking you today to donate by PayPal or Zelle, because those donations reach us immediately, and the GoFundMe donations reach us 2 or 3 days down the line. Sometimes if there's a weekend, even longer than that. So since these are funds that are really needed today, if you possibly can, donate by PayPal or Zelle. All right. Also, don't forget to like our video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so you get notified when new videos come out. Let us know what you think in the comments. Participate in the discussions in the comments, and share these videos with your friends on social media and email, etc. All right, let's talk about the oral law. So Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish historian that lived in the first century, and he wrote in his book Antiquities of the Jews, book 13, chapter 11, section 6, he writes, "The Pharisees have delivered to the people a great many observances by succession from their fathers, which are not written in the law of Moses." Okay, so there are two different things that are part of the oral law. Okay, two parts. One might say there are two different things that are called oral law. And so when I post about the oral law, some of the responses from people make it clear that they're ignorant of the distinction between two different types of oral law, and that there are two different things that one could be talking about in context of the oral law, and they just broad stroke about one or the other without having a clear understanding that that both components exist. So the first kind of oral law is oral law from Sinai. That means that when Moshe received the Torah on Mount Sinai, he received more than just the written Torah that we have. In fact, the last verse of Leviticus chapter 26, in referring to Moshe's receiving of the Torah, refers to that he received laws or Torahs in the plural in the Hebrew. Okay, so Moshe was up on Mount Sinai for 40 days receiving the Torah. Now, if you take the written Torah and you play it as an MP3 file, it will take you between 4 and 5 hours. Okay, roughly 4.5 hours. So if the Torah was being dictated to Moshe on Mount Sinai, it wouldn't have taken 40 days. It would have taken about 4.5 hours. The very fact that he was up there for 40 days receiving the Torah tells us that he received a whole lot more information than the 4.5 hours of information found in the written Torah. And there are a lot of elements in the written Torah that cannot be kept without an oral companion. From day one, when a person, and especially a society, chooses to be Torah observant, there are immediately issues that come up, questions that have to be answered in order to actually do it. For example, a prime example is that there's a commandment in the Torah in Exodus 16. It says not to go out of your place on Shabbat. And we did a video on this recently. What does it mean not to go out of your place on Shabbat? In fact, I believe that was our last video. And when Moshe comes down from Mount Sinai with the written Torah and delivers it to the people, and little Shmuel on the first row raises his hand and says, "What does it mean not to go out of your place on Shabbat? What does that place mean? Does that mean that if I'm in the latrine when Shabbat starts, I can't go back in the house? Or if I'm in my house when Shabbat starts and I get, intestinal cramps and I really need to go to the latrine, I have to stay in the house?" What does that mean? Okay, and there's an answer to what that means, and we discussed it in detail in our last video, but the short answer, it's 2,000 cubits, which was also the distance from Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives, which is why in Acts chapter 1, when it refers to a trip from the Mount of Olives to Jerusalem being made by the emissaries, it calls it a Sabbath day's journey. Okay, because that was the limit of how far one could travel on the Shabbat. It was the definition of what not going out of your place meant, what constituted a place. Again, go back and watch that video for much more detail, but the point is that's information you have to have on day one to observe the Sabbath. Okay, There are other elements, many, many more things that I could point to. For example, the Torah says that if you get hungry and you want a hamburger and the temple is too far away, then in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 21, the written Torah gives us a solution. The written Torah, Deuteronomy 12:21 says, if the place which the Lord your God, or literally Yahweh your Elohim, has chosen to put his name there be too far from you, that's a reference to the temple, or the tabernacle before that, be too far from you, then you shall kill of your herd and of your flock which the Lord has given you, as I have commanded you, and you shall eat in your gates whatsoever your soul lusts after. Okay. So when it says, as I have commanded you, it's saying, hey, it's okay, you can slaughter an animal somewhere else besides the actual temple, as long as you do it in the manner that I have given you, or in the manner in which I have commanded you. Problem: the method of slaughter of an animal, which the written Torah says Elohim commanded us, is nowhere to be found in the written Torah. Instead, it can be found in the oral Torah, and it is recorded in Tractate Hulin in the Talmud, but it is nowhere to be found in the written Torah. We could go through example after example. The Torah talks about a bill of divorcement, a get, but it doesn't tell you what a get has to actually say, what constitutes a get. We could go on and on and on about the issues that one has to have, and there are other things like the water libation ceremony at Sukkot. That was also oral Torah from Sinai. It's not to be found in the written Torah. Okay, but there's another kind of oral Torah. That other kind of oral Torah is also a derivative of the written Torah, in that it's described in the written Torah as follows. Deuteronomy chapter 17, starting in verse 8. If there arise a matter too hard for you in judgment between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between stroke and stroke, being matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and get you up into a place which the Lord your God shall choose. And you shall come unto the priests, the Levites, and unto the judge that shall be in those days, and inquire, and they shall show you the sentence of judgment, and you shall do according to the sentence which they of that place which the Lord shall choose shall show you, and you shall observe to do according to all that they inform you, according to the sentence of the Torah which they shall teach you, according to the judgment which they shall tell you. You shall do you shall not decline from the sentence which they shall show you in the right hand, nor to the right hand, nor to the left. Okay, so here we're told that matters will come up as you're a society that's observing Torah that aren't covered in the written Torah. You're going to have to figure some things out when situations come up. A good example is, for example, the Torah says that under certain circumstances, if a thief is caught, he must pay back a double portion, or a multiple portion. He must pay back additional fines, punitive damages, if you will, in addition to just the making whole the theft, returning the item or returning the value of the item. He must pay back a double portion, or in some cases, some special cases, even more than that. And the question is, there's another issue that arises in Torah about situations that arise, different kinds of custodians of property. So there are different situations where I might be a custodian of your property. It's not my property, but I'm the custodian of that property. Either I borrowed it, or I rented it, or you asked me to take care of it for you. There's different situations whereby I might be in possession of your property. Now, if the thief steals that property from me, and the thief is caught, and he must pay back a double portion or punitive damages, who gets the damages? Me, the victim of the theft, or the owner of the property? And it gets more complicated because it can be more complicated depending on whether I turned around when the item was stolen and went and made the owner whole and compensated him for the value of the property. There's whole issues that all come up around who's entitled to the damages, the additional damages, depending on the circumstances. It's not in the written Torah, but it comes up before a court, and the decisions have to be made, and so that they're consistent, those decisions become Torah. So when the same situation comes up again, we know what to do. And that's what this passage of Torah is telling us, is that when these difficult situations come up, bring them before the judges that shall be in those days. The judges will decide, and then their sentence becomes Torah. And that is actually the word that is used in the written Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 11, which says, according to the sentence of the Torah. And the Hebrew here is al pe ha-Torah. Al means concerning or about. Pe means the mouth, oral. Okay, and it comes from a word meaning mouth. And it means something that's oral, that's spoken, that's oral. And then ha-Torah. In fact, it's very similar to the phrase of the Hebrew phrase for oral Torah. Okay, so these decisions that were judgments that were made by the judges that shall be in those days, by the assembly of elders, more or less, that, for example, what's called the Great Assembly and later the Sanhedrin, they also became Torah. And that became another part of the oral Torah in addition to what was given at Mount Sinai. So these are two different things that are both called oral Torah. They're both components of the oral Torah. And they were both passed down orally. Okay? And the Torah calls both of these, the written Torah calls both of these things Torah. Okay? They are an organic part of the Torah. As I said, when Moshe was on Mount Sinai for 40 days, he didn't just receive the written Torah, because that would have only taken 4.5 hours, not 40 days. Okay, so it gets a little more complicated for those of us who are believers in Yeshua as the Messiah, as the Jewish Messiah of Judaism, from a what I call Nazarene Judaism perspective, because they were the ancient sect of the Nazarenes. There is a point in time where Yeshua, and do a whole different video on this, and will, but there was a point in time where Yeshua took his emissaries and he endowed them with this halakhic authority. He designated them to be the judges of those days that are spoken of in Deuteronomy 17. And we see that in Matthew chapter 16 and 18, if they're understood correctly. And we see that court in action in Acts 15. So this creates for us a distinction. It breaks this second part of oral law, these judgments of the elders, into two areas for us. Those that were made before the time of Yeshua, and those that were made after the time of Yeshua. So those that were made before the time of Yeshua, there's an easy breaking point for us, because the leaders of the Sanhedrin, you had Hillel the Great, and Yeshua was a teacher of the school of Hillel. So Hillel said, "Do not to others what you would not have them do to you." Yeshua said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." We could go on about the idea that Yeshua was a teacher of the school of Hillel versus the school of Shammai. Hillel taught the spirit of the Torah. Shammai taught the letter of the Torah. Okay, Yeshua's very Hesed-oriented, very lenient teaching was very much in keeping with the school of Hillel. Okay. Then Hillel's son was a guy named Shimon, and none of his Shimon became his successor. Hillel was leader of the Sanhedrin. After Hillel died, his son Shimon became leader of the Sanhedrin. We don't know a lot about Shimon, though I believe, we could do a whole video about this sometime, that he was the Shimon that blessed Yeshua when Yeshua was a baby at the beginning of the book of Luke. Okay? Shimon, we know almost nothing about him, and we don't know any of his rulings. None of the rulings of his Sanhedrin have been recorded in any of the oral law that has come down to us. His successor was Gamliel, and Gamliel he's mentioned in Acts chapter 5, among other places. Gamliel is his court. We do have those rulings. So we have a nice little spot where we can divide. We can say, okay, we can accept the rulings of the courts starting back from Hillel backwards. But we don't have any rulings from Shammai, so that gives us almost like a demilitarized zone, if you will, a buffer zone. And then from the court of Gamliel forward, all the way through to the court of Gamliel II, and the sages of the Talmuds and the Amorim and whatnot. That material we shouldn't reject out of hand, but we should scrutinize it and look at the methodology, which is a wonderful thing that the Talmud preserves for us. The arguments and the counter-arguments and the minority views and all the nuances of those views and the logic of the arguments that was used back and forth, so that we can study those views, understand them, scrutinize them in light of what we know of Yeshua's teachings, and arrive at a Nazarene conclusion on each of those various topics. Okay, so the oral law is from our perspective, three parts, if you will. The first part of the oral Torah is oral Torah from Sinai. Things like the water libation ceremony, what it means to go out, not to go out of your place on Shabbat, by the way, which is verified by the book of Acts when it talks about a Sabbath day's journey, and it designates a Sabbath day's journey in context as the journey from Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives, which was historically 2,000 cubits and was historically the travel, what constituted going out if your place was going a distance further than that on Shabbat. So Acts agrees with the oral law on that matter. Okay, and things like the method of slaughter of an animal and so on. Okay. Then we have the second part of the written law. The next part of the oral law, I'm sorry, are the rulings of the judges from the time of Moshe all the way up to the time of Hillel the Great, and then there's a buffer zone after Hillel the Great during of Shimon that we don't have to worry about because nobody has his rulings anyway. And then I think that's very convenient and intentional on the part of Elohim. And then we have a third part of the oral law, Gamliel forward, where we as Nazarenes would scrutinize. We wouldn't simply accept that as Torah, but we would scrutinize it and determine whether the rulings that they made were valid from our standpoint based on our knowledge of Yeshua and his halakha and the logic he used for his halachot and just logic in general. Okay, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. There are a lot of issues to talk about, and we are going to talk about them in separate videos in the future. Ask your questions, make your comments. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of them. There'll be a lot of people that object to the oral law and have some objections to make in the comments, and hopefully there'll be some others, some support. But let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll address the things that are in the comments in future videos. So don't think they'll be ignored. I may go in, and sometimes I do, respond to the comments, and often your comments also inspire future videos. Okay, I do one more time need to ask you to please donate to support this work. I also should mention we're doing yeshiva classes. We have 2 classes on Shabbat. One is a Talmud class, which you're free to join into anytime. There's also we're about to do the last day of the Dead Sea Scrolls class, but after that we're going to start a class on Hebrew and Aramaic origins of the New Testament. And so we're also on Tuesday evenings doing a class through the Gospels as a single narrative from a Jewish perspective, and we just barely got started on that class, so it's a good time to still get in on that class from the ground up. If you want to participate in those classes, or you have questions about those classes, email me at cleartruth@yahoo.com. That's cleartruth@yahoo.com. Those classes are being handled online, conducted online via Facebook Messenger as a group video call. So we'll have to connect on Facebook Messenger to bring you in, and we'll add you in, and I'll be glad to have you. We're asking people to please try and donate if they possibly can. We know some people can't, but if you possibly can, please donate to support the class. We're asking people to donate at least $25. More, if they can't donate, we understand that too. But if they can, please at least donate at least $25, and preferably even more if you can possibly donate more each week for those classes. All right. You can donate by sending donations to by PayPal to donations@wnae.org, or by clicking the donate link in the video description. Don't forget to like our video, subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell. I already said, let us know what you think in the comments. I'm sure on this one there will be plenty of that. And participate in the discussions in the comments. Share these videos with your friends on social media and email. And until next time, everybody, shalom.